I have 2 points to make in this video that should inspire some fun comments down below. Point number 1, if Alex Pereira never fought again, he would retire with a much better legacy than Khabib. And point number 2, Khabib does not belong in the greatest of all time conversation. Now, there is a certain set of the population that gets really mad when you say anything bad about Khabib, but just hear me out before you click off the video. At the time of this recording, Alex Pereira's MMA record is 12-2. His first MMA loss was his very first MMA fight after he transitioned from kickboxing. His second MMA loss was to Israel Adesanya, who he had just knocked out 5 months earlier. I mentioned transitioning from kickboxing. Alex also has a win over Izzy in kickboxing. Izzy is one of the best UFC middleweights of all time, and if you include kickboxing, Alex has a record against Izzy of 2-1. And yes, Khabib did retire 29-0 undefeated, but we need to look a little closer at Khabib's record. The combined record of everyone that Khabib fought before the UFC is 65-48. And now it's not uncommon for guys on the way up to fight lower level competition. That's not my point here. But Khabib's last fight before the UFC, he fought a guy that was 28-22. Alex Pereira has 14 MMA fights. He's a 2-division UFC champion, and he has defended a UFC title 3 times, the same number of times that Khabib defended his UFC title. In Khabib's 14th MMA fight, he fought a guy with a 0-0 record. And don't get me wrong, Khabib was an incredible fighter. He was a dominant champion, and people always look at title defenses as a marker of how good a champion is and where they might fall on the greatest of all time conversation. And like I previously stated, both Khabib and Alex Pereira have 3 title defenses, although I would bet my house that Alex will have at least a couple more before his career is over. Khabib then went on to defend his belt against Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, and Justin Gaethje. Alex Pereira won his belt from Israel Adesanya, who, as I previously mentioned, is one of the best middleweights of all time. He defended the UFC 205 belt against Jamal Hill, Yuri Prochazka, and most recently Khalil Rountree Jr. I will leave it up to you to argue about whose title defenses are more impressive. If Alex was to lose his next 5 fights, which I don't see happening, but if he was to do that, perhaps I would concede that Khabib was a better champion than Alex. But I think part of the mythology of Khabib is his dominant grappling style and the fact that he did retire relatively young at a time when there wasn't really anyone we thought would beat him in that division. Part of the argument that gets made is that he never would have lost, no one would have beat him, and that's why he is so great even though he retired. And my simple rebuttal to that argument would be Chris Weidman. Let's play a simple hypothetical. Chris Weidman, at the time that he defended his belt for the 3rd time against Vitor Belfort, was 13-0 in the UFC, and in his MMA career, he was undefeated. And at that time, people were talking about Weidman being on the pound-for-pound best list because he had defeated Anderson Silva twice. He had defended his belt 2 times against Lyoto Machida and Vitor Belfort, both former UFC champions. But if Weidman would have retired, if after that Vitor Belfort fight, he said, okay, I'm retiring, I've got my 3 title defenses, I'm done, would we consider him to be the greatest fighter of all time? No, we wouldn't. We obviously would not. We have the benefit now of knowing what happens next. Weidman loses his belt to Luke Rockhold, and since that Vitor defense, he's 3-7. Would Khabib have been 3-7 to end his career if he kept fighting after the Gaethje fight? I don't think so, but I can't say for sure. You can't assume someone's dominance based on their performance right now if they retire. You can't just assume that they were unbeatable and no one would ever beat them. I know Weidman and Khabib are not identical fighters with identical styles, but they're very similar. They're both undefeated. They both have 3 title defenses. One kept fighting and the other didn't. I don't think retiring undefeated with 3 title defenses is enough to be the greatest fighter of all time. So to sum up, Alex Pereira is a better champion than Khabib was, and Khabib is often put way too high on lists that people make about who the best fighter of all time was. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm sure the debate will be civil and fun.